got a moon boot on, but I haven't been skiing. I'm not that posh. I fell over in Queen Street, bugger it. Anyway, thank you for coming, and thank you for being here and hanging on. Am I a nerd? Yes, I am in a way, but in a creative sense. I'm 74 now, so what I'm teaching you tonight, or showing you tonight, has nothing to do with some sort of ego. Absolutely not. It's about a lifetime of trying to make people realise that we're actually fucking this planet, basically. I'm starting off with this image here. This was in 1977, the 4th of February at 2 a.m. in the morning at the geographic South Pole. I couldn't believe it. Here I was standing at the South Pole with Charlie the gnome, the first garden gnome to make it to the South Pole. You'll notice that Charlie is white, as if he had adapted himself to the environment. He was actually burned when he went down to Antarctica in a Jamesway, which is a hut. And he was the only thing that survived. All the paint had burnt off him. Here he is there. You can see him by Scott Base. There was no dogs on the front of it at that time. I was just posing. I went down as a civilian mess cook for the United States Navy and worked our butts off, washing dishes and keeping them all happy, and I worked the night shift. It didn't matter because it was daylight all the time then when I went down in November 1976. In any case, in my spare time, I got to work with scientists. These were some doctors from Massachusetts Hospital who were working with Weddell seals. They were catching them like that, you can see, they're huge mothers, and tying them up, and then cutting the flippers and so forth open, and trying to work out how the seal could dive to great depths and come back up without getting what we call a bends, and could just supply oxygen just to the vital organs of the body. They were trying to relate it to human beings back in Massachusetts who came into the hospital who were dying because they couldn't get blood supplied to the vital organs. Anyway, I didn't know that, but I used to do the drawings for them as they were cutting them open, the anatomical drawings and so forth. So it was quite interesting, but at the time I didn't think too much of what they were doing to the mammals down there. There was lots of things I got involved with. I even was drawing a comic strip for the McMurdo sometimes, once a week. I had scrappy bits of paper, but I drew it. And went round the base. I think I became the first cartoonist resident in Antarctica. Not many people would know that, I don't think it's written anywhere. I took photos everywhere around the ice, and we'd go out, and I'd go out with different scientists and so forth, and way out on this sea ice, miles from nowhere, was a caravan. I couldn't believe it. As if a family had lost their way going to Kaikoura. Here it was sitting there. It would stay there then. This is back in 1977, until the ice broke up underneath and it would sink. In fact, at McMurdo, and to an extent I'd say Scott Base, then waste was tossed aside. I could show you lots on this, but I don't want to get too involved. I remember waste being food waste and material waste and buildings that pushed to the side of the where the sea ice was, and when it broke up, it would just drop down. There was even believed a small plane dropped to the bottom of the ocean. There was lots of issues going on down there. Why did I put that gnome at the South Pole? I think I started to realise gnomes, if you go back and look at them as history, mythology, in the history, they are represented as being guardians of the earth. The ordinary artist will look at you and think, oh, that's kitsch and bad taste. You know, and I got criticised for that, having been through art school, God knows what. But I collected them, and the media got hold of me all the time. We came back from Antarctica. This is the Television New Zealand interviewing me back then. Hasn't changed, has it? in my parents' backyard and asking about why Charlie went to the South Pole. I went on to London after that and met up with a whole lot of cartoonists. They were people like from Punch cartoonists and so forth, and there was a lot of other people. The media over there wanted to know why the gnome went to the South Pole. The Evening Standard, Daily Mirror, even the Times and BBC got hold of me back then and were doing interviews, and I thought, I need to put a gnome at the North Pole. We've got one at the South Pole, it makes logic to put one at the North Pole to remind us to look after this planet. So, in 1980, I wrote to the Prime Minister of New Zealand, asking him if he could give me a reference to get a gnome to the North Pole. The Prime Minister at the time was Rob Muldoon, believe it or not. And he wrote this amazing letter which said I was interested in making gnomes an environmental status, that we could look after the planet and so forth. With that letter, I sent it to the Governor-General. He gave me a reference because he thought I knew Rob Muldoon. I had two references, and Hamish Hay, the Mayor of Christchurch then, gave me a reference to see the Mayor of Edmonton because he thought I knew all these people. My wife, Suzanne, who's here tonight, and Daniel, who was 5 at the time, we arrived in Canada to try and get funding to go to the North Pole. Walked into Neville Purvis's office, the Mayor of Edmonton, and he said, how can I help you? Cheese and scones and all that, you know. He said, how's Rob and his wife? And I said, oh no, they're good, thank you. He thought I knew all these people. It's quite weird. This is paper warfare then, nothing to do with social media. I can't help you, he said, but I will get you a meeting with the head of the Canadian Armed Forces. I had longish hair, a beard, and I walked in, and there's this guy leaning back looking at me, and you could see he was going, who's this mother? You know, sort of thing. And he thought I'd fallen off my mushroom. And I explained I wanted to get a garden gnome to the North Pole because they're symbols of environmental protection. He said, well, there's actual commercial airlines will fly you there, Borak Airlines. We started to raise some interest in Canada, and we were invited to a party, a large party with a lot of middle-aged men there. My wife, Suzanne, was there, and someone would come up to me at this party and say, are you a commie? And I said, no. And then someone came up and said, I represent an oil company, I'll get you to the North Pole, but you say what we want you to say. It got vicious. Sue was the other side of the room. She was getting questioned. I knew we were in the shit. We got out of there quick. The next day, the reporter who was arranged the party came, and he said, yes, they were government agents, including the CIA. Greenpeace and the Friends of the Earth were fledgling at that time. I would have been the third person, I think, to have stood at both poles. But besides that, a gnome at each end of the pole, media would have gone apeshit over it, you know, loved it. And then you said the Guardians, G-N-O-M-E, gnome, standing for guarding naturally over Mother Earth. It's a term that I put together. But if you go online, you can find all the history and that. Let's go back to that. Oops, I'm just getting that. Murat, French, when they're exploding bombs and testing things and that. We sent some gnomes out on their yachts, that went to protest. They're all dressed in radiation suits, little ones. Even the Prime Minister sent one at the time, and also our Mayor and so forth. In 1995, we held the first International Gnome Convention here in Christchurch. There was over 250 garden gnomes attended in the Robert McDougall Art Gallery, which was the old art gallery. They all sat down at a table. The oldest gnome in Britain came out. A little thing about that big had an insurance value of £1 million. Unbelievable, Lambie. In that photo there, the little guy fishing is Bob Mainbridge, lovely man. Behind him is Terry Major, John Major's brother. And the Majors used to make garden gnomes in the early days. I didn't know that, but they came out to the expedition, to the convention. We had all sorts of people. It went off well. In fact, here's Bob fishing in the Botanic Gardens, scared the shit out of kids in Christchurch that walked around. He'd jump out of trees. You know, he used to be in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, so he knew what he was doing. I do remember that time, but we did get a lot of publicity overseas about it. It was under GNOME, Guardian Naturally Over Mother Earth. We even had Christchurch's its own official garden gnome, which not many people know. And that's in the Botanic Gardens by the Children's Play Area. It was unveiled by Vicky Buck, the mayor at the time. The banner reads, Guardian Naturally Over Mother Earth. It was made by Bing Dore. Here he is there, bronze gnome. If you go in there, you'll find him and see him. There was over 8,000 people attended that convention in the gallery. It was one of the biggest exhibitions they had. Do you hear that? With regards to art? No, because of gnomes. Here's another little friend who's travelled the world. I've got him on the table there, I'll show you in a minute. He's been to most places. That's even the White House. In actual fact, he managed to get to the North Pole. And this was 35 years after I tried to. He got to the North Pole with Bob Headland, who was from the Cambridge University Polar Research Unit. He got there twice, actually. We didn't. But it wasn't spoken about too much, but nevertheless, don't give up. Here we go. I even got proof of it. I'm a firm believer that art should have a meaning. It's not just set in a gallery intellectualising, wanking on walls. It should have a meaning. It should communicate with people. Cartoonists communicate with people. If they can't communicate, they haven't got a job. We made art cars. I made art cars with kids. This was at Hornby High. I never gave one detention in the 6 to 8 weeks. They wanted to stay the night and work on it. Driving that round was driving around like a clown's head. And even the most anal retentive had to look at it. I saw one guy when I was driving. He was looking and he started to laugh. He could have been a lawyer. And he started to look and then he started to laugh and he banged into a lamppost. Amazing. We made art prams. That young lady who's in there would be in the 30s now. I don't think her life is quite the same. What I got the students to do both at Hornby High and then at ARA in art and design, what I got them to do was decorate suits. I would do it first and demonstrate. I never told them to do something, I'd do it also. Here's a wee friend of mine that I showed on television. I used to do television work. My twin brother used to be on What Now, doing mad things. This is my rock wheeler. I pulled it last summer and people said, oh my God, there's a rock on wheels. And I said, it's a rock wheel. Oh my God, can I take a photo? So the whole idea with gnomes, I try and get the message out there, but with teachers who are protesting in the 1990s about bulk funding in schools. They had horrible banners. And I went to a meeting and there was about 400 teachers and I said, why don't you wear your undies on the outside of your clothes for the day and go to school? There was silence. I said, not only will you get national media coverage, you'll get international media coverage, then you can put your point across. It didn't happen. So we came up with the Tick and Cross campaign. Yes, flowers and road cones. I might have initiated that and put it on Facebook and it went viral, but it was the people who did it. They wanted some way to express themselves. It went as far as Scott Base and as far as London. On the first anniversary, just about every road cone in Christchurch had a flower in it. Special. And it's not, I mean, I should know how to do that, for God's sake. I'm trained as a creative person. And it's even carried through. Some might know there's a Duke of Wellington statue. It's always had a road cone on top. The Scots have put road cones on top of it, and they've allowed them to do it. And just recently with Ukraine, they put another road cone that got flowers in. I want to talk about this little guy here, Achilles. Achilles the gnome came to me in about 2001. Gary Endicott, I don't know if you ever heard of Gary, he's a promotional speaker, but Gary took him to the top of Kilimanjaro for me. Gary's got cerebral palsy. He sort of limped a bit, you know. I taught him at Hornby High. He took him to the top. When he got to the top, he was so tired his feet were bleeding, he had to be carried off. He brought the gnome back, and Helen Clark wrote on the gnome, "Good on you, Gary." So that's written on that gnome there. See Ed Hillary, I met him, lucky to meet him 1 or 2 times, and at Scott Base Centenary, here he is with the little gnome he's going to place in front of Captain Scott's statue. Here is a gnome that we presented them at Warner's Hotel, which is not there now, and he signed it. He understood that gnomes represented at least guarding naturally over Mother Earth. Here is Achilles in Japan, wandering around the place. Tim Harashiki, a colleague who was going over there to get students for ARA, took him around Japan, and I said, would you go and meet up with Junko Tapi and get her signature? She promised she'll sign it. Junko Tapi, in 1975, was the first woman to climb Mount Everest. No one knows that. It's always about blokes. She climbed Mount Everest, 35 foot high. One of her expressions is, I don't know why men made such a fuss about Everest. But the interesting thing also, she's climbed every major mountain in the 7 continents of the world, and then she became an environmentalist and worked a lot at Nepal. And sadly, she passed away about a year after that photo was taken from cancer. The Dalai Lama signed signatures are on there when he was in Christchurch. I couldn't believe it. Someone okayed me. Someone gave the okay, and he signed it. Wow, that was a biggie, I thought. You know, but these people are all onto this gnome. It's making it special, I believe. Jim Yellowhawk, whose great-great-grandfather was a good mate of Sitting Bull, believe it or not. I was at a creative conference in 2015 in Wellington, where I was giving some talks, and he was also, he signed it. Here is Anna and Rael from Italy, who came up with the idea of Capsula Mundi. And the idea of Capsula Mundi is when you die, you get buried in a capsule. And a tree's out the top, little tree, and you get buried in the ground and you help to create a forest, not a cemetery, which I thought was really quite good. Here we are, Jacinda. When she was signing that, she said, do I just put Jacinda? I said, well, Jacinda would do an MP, please. A lot of people signed it, and there's 1 or 2 that I've got turned down, not too many. The Pope I never got near. Don't know why. Would have seen him as pagan, no doubt. But this guy here, I can't read it, sorry, from there, but it's a letter back from David Attenborough. He said, basically, he said, well, quite frankly, I don't like garden gnomes, therefore, in all sincerity, I cannot sign it. The strange thing about that is, not long after that, I met up with Jane Goodall, a person that's got no toxins in their personality. Beautiful, beautiful woman, I thought, I felt. And I had a tear in my eye. She said, I'm just me. And I had half an hour that was wonderful. I know if I spoke to her about David Attenborough, she would have gone back and had a word in his ear. You know, there is a sort of a thing goes on there. Here she is, signing the gnome, which is quite rapt. I always try to get students involved in what I do and spread the word, and so they can be part of it. Here is Achilles. Yeah, I try to get a few first with him, you know. I've got to be careful the signatures don't rub off. Here's 2 sets of identical triplets signed him. Well, how common is that? I know them, but because I was a twin, I lost my twin some years back, but because I was a twin, I had a foot in the door. And here, in Auckland, in November 2020, we went up to Rocket Lab, my wife Suzanne and myself, and there's Peter Beck. Peter Beck signed him Rocket Lab. The reason was that anyone know Gabe Newell, the gamer, Half-Life and Half-Life 2? No? No, there's no gamers here. I thought you were all nerds. Anyway, he came over from the States and he was living on his yacht. And he was behind putting a gnome Chomsky into space. Here he is here. They actually put that gnome into space. I was invited up to the launch, but I couldn't make it because I promised my students we would do something. I was a bit disappointed. He said, right, you can come round for lunch on my boat. Or my yacht, he said. There it is. I couldn't believe it. $100 million. And I thought, what sort of guy is this Gabe Newell going to be? I met him. Here he is here. No different from anyone in this room here. We sat down and had a meal. My granddaughter was there and my son. He wanted to sign the gnome. We talked about the environment and what we could do in gnomes and so forth, and he agreed with me, or some of it, and he was doing environmental work that you wouldn't hear about. He's only worth $4.5 billion. Unbelievable. But we left on it just mates. I never got any of it. Sorry, I've been silly. During lockdown, I produced about 3 books, cartoon books, on what was going on. This one is 200 days on lockdown, cartoons, and each day I'd send one up to Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, just to keep them going. There's no conspiracy theories of what. He came down and came around our place, and I remember Sue saying, what a nice guy. He wasn't, he was just an ordinary bloke, you know. And he signed the gnome, he wanted to. I keep a record of it, what's on Achilles. This is the last signature I've got. I've only mentioned some of them. Richie McCaw's on there, by the way, too. I haven't mentioned many, but this woman here, Julia Butterfly Hill, does anyone know of her? She climbed a redwood tree in 1997 in California to save the lumberjack company, Pacific Lumberjack Company, from chopping it down. She was quite young, 23 or 24 at the time. She had a platform to live on. She ended up staying at the top of that tree to save it for over 2 years. Over 2 years. When I heard about this, I managed to get hold of her, you know, as you do, to get a direct line. And she didn't believe in fossil fuels. So we weren't going to fly there or do anything, which haven't got the money anyhow. So I sent some plasters to her, which were biodegradable and green, and she signed her name on it. And there she is, photo of her now. She just turned 50 and sent them back. And the students at ARA, the ones finishing outdoor education and sustainability in their last year, degree year, wanted to have an occasion to stick that plaster on top of Achilles. And they did so, and we made a film and so forth. It's meant to go out to the media, but it'll go back to her, to show her. I think it's pretty cool. They were inspired by what she did, and it's by using the gnome as a vehicle, you know, in a sense. This was a friend of mine, cartoonist, a good mate of mine in London, a punch cartoonist in our Private Eye, that says, we've been picnicking here for years. Is this us, human beings? We've been picnicking here for years. Is this what we're doing to the planet? It's a very simple. When I saw it, I said, kid, I love it. And so he sent it to me. I don't know. What do you think? And here we are. Will gnomes save the planet? Not on their own, we need support. But I certainly have been using them as a vehicle to express the idea that we need to look after our planet. And I think I'm not saying anything you don't already know. I think that's about all I have to say. It's been a praise-seed version of it. I mean, I could tell you so many different stories. It's crazy. It'll be really crazy stories about gnomes and who have met and what we've done and that. But there it is. So I'm still doing it, 74. And thank you. Can I just say one thing? Suzanne's down the back. She's going to be embarrassed like shit and going to kick me when she gets home as my wife. For all the years she's put up with me since we've met, and my obsession with gnomes in the creative sense, and followed me, or followed us. She's an amazing creative person herself, with the gardening and everything, and I'm sure you all are. But thanks, Sue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Henry. And what's the little guy's name? What's the little gnome's name?
Oh, what's his name? Sorry?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Because he's had them come and go. Oh, Paul's down the back there. Paul, you took it down to Antarctica several times, didn't you? Yeah. No, he comes and goes. Paul was doing looking at Scott Mason, Murdo. He was looking at how they looked after the environment and so forth. But he's around. As I said, he's always been. If you name a place, he's been there. But if any of you are travelling to a place, it's easy to carry. You can place him in here, take him with you, get some photos to bring him back. There's a trust in him. You can add to the story. Have a think about it. I didn't even bring Jerome or my other gnomes, my personal gnome. And this story, amazing story about Sorry? Right.
Any questions? Yeah, there's one back here.
Hello. Sorry, I'm very sorry. We're just, talk, I can't remember what it was. Go on. Sorry.
Hi Henry, that was a great talk. How do you feel about the Garden Gnome Liberation Front that happened in France?
It's a bit like, if I started off, gnomes in the 18th century and 19th century leading into the 21st century, they were old, well-formed and well-made. A lot of them were made in Austria and Germany, and if you got one of those today, which are quite large, and optioned it, you get about $6,000 for it. Then they slowly there were Edwardian's gardens, and then they slowly relegated into everyone's garden, and then they started to be made in Japan and so forth. Some of the little gnomes you'll see around today have got knives in their backs or doing things, or pinks showing their ass, all of that. But once they were regarded as having, a reasonable status, does that make sense? So we've got to get back to that status again. It's not the gnome that's important, it's the message. Does that make sense? But the Gnome Liberation Front, yes, I know of that. It comes and goes. I think if you look up something like Country Life Gnomes, Country Life is a magazine. I just saw that last week, and I didn't realise, but last year they did an article on gnomes, and it starts off with Charlie was making his way to the South Pole, cold and frozen, and then it did about the Queen's Garden and everyone else having them, in the whole history. And he ended up with, but Charlie was the first to start that travelling. So the Gnomes Liberation Front is just you know what I mean? It's just another way of getting their own message out. Yeah.
Thank you. One more question, anyone? Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for coming, and thank you so much, Henry and Achilles.
Sorry.